Planet Dolan. From a lifeguard ignoring a drowning swimmer to people making fun of someone getting seriously hurt, the Planet Dolan crew reenact some of the best true stories from our subreddit about times people refuse to help. I'm Dee Dee's brother, and today I'll be your narrator. Number 10 was submitted by Zio29. Emoji and his family had just moved into a new house. While Emoji and his brothers were moving a cabinet upstairs, his brother turned around to answer the phone. In the process, Emoji's brother let the cabinet fall on top of Emoji. Crushed under the massive cabinet, Emoji screamed for him to get it off. Instead, his unsympathetic brother told him to shut up because he was on the phone with his boss. Emoji's father ended up coming to his aid. In the end, Emoji's brother ended up getting fired. Number 9 was submitted by Smurfinater. Back in 2008, the year Nixium married Nikki, his truck ran out of gas at a red light. To make matters worse, it was on an incline. He tried to push his stalled truck out the way, but he couldn't. Instead of helping Nixium push his truck to the side, the angry drivers behind him just honked their horns. Right then, when Nixium was ready to give up and call someone, a homeless man approached him. He'd gotten up from his bench and helped Nixium push his truck into a nearby parking lot. Nixium was actually heartbroken that he didn't have a dime to pay him, because at the time he was broke and hoped to make it home from work. Nixium wishes that he could find him again and give him $100 for his kindness. Number 8 was submitted by Victorious L19. Melissa went on many walks in 2015. In August, something was wrong with her balance and posture. She walked to the store up the street from where she lived. It was a shortcut Melissa always took, which consisted of cutting through the sidewalk and shrubs. While going through the shrubs, Melissa lost her balance and collapsed. Tons of cars waited at a red light just behind her. Melissa noticed that some people actually saw her fall, but they were just sitting there. There happened to be one driver who rolled down their windows, but instead of asking something along the lines of, "Are you okay?" the driver ended up laughing at her. Embarrassed and irritated, Melissa went inside the store to cool off. Since that day, whenever Melissa walks to that same store, she hears people shouting, "Don't fall," along with laughter. It wasn't until later that year when Melissa was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, which happened to explain why she was so clumsy and unable to walk right. Melissa had to use a cane from that point on. Number 7 was submitted by HaydenTreesPinkPants. One summer, Shima and her family went to Florida for her aunt's wedding. They went to the beach, but Shima, being a cat and all, didn't really want to go in the water. So she just sat by where the snacks were. Eventually, Shima thought, why not, and went in the water. She walked out into the ocean pretty far, past her cousins. Suddenly, she lost all her energy by fighting the waves just to get out there. The tide came in, and Shima found herself about a foot underwater. She didn't panic, and was able to get to the surface and call out for help. Her brother saw that she was in jeopardy, but just stood there staring at her. Shima's mum and cousins were talking, and the lifeguard was too busy talking on his phone. After drowning for about 2 minutes, Shima was rescued by a very tall man she had met prior to the incident. As he brought her to shore, Shima and the man saw the lifeguard sitting there still glued to his phone. However, nobody would walk with her to tell his supervisor that he was slacking off. To this day, Shima still holds a grudge over that so-called lifeguard. Number 6 was submitted by Mini Bear Blue. One time, Robo's entire family went to the zoo. Parents had 6 kids, so family trips were always a little bit chaotic. 3 of her little brothers were still under the age of 5, so her parents made sure to write her father's cell phone number on their arms. The idea was that if one of them gets lost, all they would have to do is show their arm to a staff member. Well, Robo's 3-year-old brother got distracted and wandered off. Once they realized he was missing, Robo and her entire family started looking for him. Robo finally found him an hour later. Her little brother was walking down the pathway, tears streaming down his face while frantically looking for his family. It turned out there were tons of adults wandering around the area, but not a single one thought to help a little boy that was all alone and obviously in distress. Once Robo and her brother saw each other, he ran into Robo's arms and wouldn't let her put him down for the longest time. Number 5 was submitted by ThanatosYing. When she was in high school, Ladybot came down with a throat infection during a band trip to New York City and Washington, D.C. She couldn't talk without coughing and couldn't get anything down except for milkshakes and tea. Being from Texas, Ladybot and her bandmates had to drive 32 hours to New York City, then to Washington, D.C. She had family in the D.C. area and they wanted to take her to the doctor. However, the directors of the band refused. They didn't even let Ladybot see the on-hand medic they had brought with them. When Ladybot was on the verge of passing out, the nasty directors didn't even allow her to call her family. Upon returning to her home, she lay unconscious for 3 days. Ladybot was eventually taken to the hospital where she had to have blood drawn and go through a series of tests. The doctors found out she had a super strain of bacteria in her throat and had to give her seriously high doses of antibiotics. Number 4 was submitted by BloodyGlass. At the Healy main campus of Ohio University, Doobie carried a couple bags to the bus stop. She was going to her grandfather's place for the weekend right before summer break. Of course, the bus stop was on the other side of campus and there was no easy way to get to it except to go over the massive hill. Doobie got about 20% of the way up the hill and she started feeling dizzy, was sweating and had trouble breathing. Heat stroke was hitting her hard and as a result she blacked out. When she woke up, Doobie found herself lying face down on the pavement. Thankfully, Doobie had landed on one of her bags so she didn't injure her face too badly. As she lay there, sprawled out on the bricks, dizzy and disoriented, people walked up and down the hill. Some glanced over at the injured and sick Doobie, while a couple pointed and laughed. Nobody came over to see if she was alright, if she needed help, or even if she was alive or dead. Doobie managed to sit up, get her bottle of water from her bag and chug it. It was her sheer stubbornness that kept her conscious long enough to save her life. She got back on her feet and stumbled into the library where she sat down and cooled off for a while before continuing to the bus stop. That was a day Doobie hated people, and her feelings haven't got any better since. Number 3 was submitted by Golanator18. One day, when Hellbent was a teenager, he walked down the stairs in his apartment building. Suddenly, he tripped and tumbled all the way to the bottom, landing on the solid concrete. He found himself bleeding from his head and nose and was too weak to get up. A couple of people looked out their doors to see what the noise was about. They saw the poor demon lying on the ground bleeding and unable to move, and instead of helping, they just went back inside their apartments. One of them even yelled at him to be quiet. Hellbent thought they could have at least asked if he was alright, but they didn't care. He wasn't sure if they were too busy, too lazy, or if they thought that trying to help someone would be a lot of work. But what Hellbent knew was that they were assholes. He eventually got up and limped back to his home where his mum patched him up. Number 2 was submitted by khazhak. While she was in junior high, Honeybits was sexually harassed on a daily basis by a large group of male students. About 10 to 15 minutes before each class started, the boys would harass her despite Honeybits making eye contact with her teacher, silently pleading for help. She'd see her teacher quickly look away and begin playing with the papers on her desk. Honeybits once called one of the boys out on it and the teacher yelled at Honeybits. The teacher told her that the boys were just trying to be her friend and that she shouldn't be so snooty. The class thought that was hilarious. The things the boys would say to Honeybits were so graphic that her parents thought she was just making it up. They ended up calling the school to complain that the sex education program was too graphic. Though it was never diagnosed, Honeybits is about 80% sure she walked away from the experience with PTSD. Number 1 is submitted by me, and is a true story that happened to me. A few years ago I was travelling to some different countries. I stopped in Austria, which is a beautiful place to visit, and borrowed a bike to see some of the countryside. It was a good way to get around. At one point I went down a gravel road, and it became a bit slippery and I fell off the bike. I looked down and my leg was bleeding, like a lot. I had to hold onto it to stop some of the bleeding, and that meant I couldn't ride back. I had to walk back to the hostel I was staying at. Along the way there were lots of cars. It was maybe 5 kilometers, and it was obvious that I was hurt, but nobody stopped. It took maybe 2.5 hours to walk back through, admittedly beautiful scenery, but I would have preferred to see it sitting in a car of someone who was helping me out. A huge thanks to the folks over on the Planet Dolan subreddit for submitting their stories. We have another question for you. What was something you did in the past that you now regret? Let us know in the Reddit page link below and you might be featured in a future countdown.
Check out the latest Dolan card update, Nixiumville. A new character, heaps of new skins, a new power-up, new level, daily missions and offline mode. Download from the Android or iOS App Store and start racing today for free.
Well, that's it for this countdown, but catch you guys next time.